On this videotape, you'll observe Richard's third client session with Andy, which took place 7 months after the second session on the previous videotape. Several days after the session, Richard showed all 3 sessions to an advanced training group. Richard's comments on all the sessions are included on this tape for your benefit. We think you'll find Richard's interventions and comments to be fascinating demonstrations of his work using metaprogram and time sorting principles. If you want to know more about those areas, you'll find it on the videotape set Building and Maintaining Generalizations.
See in the movie, when you watch this tonight with Andy, I do this to Andy to get him not to ramble, but see, when I ask questions and he's on track feeding me information I want, I just let him keep going. And then I ask questions, I use an upward inflection, and I get him to start telling me what it is that I need to know. And you'll notice that I let him run on in the beginning of the episode. And by the last one, the one we'll see tomorrow, I don't let him talk all that much. I'm all over his case because I already know what I need to know, right? And I don't need to hear anything then. But I'm looking for finding out things about how he sorts out when to have certain problems, because I want to know how he builds generalizations. I mean, shit, if he can build, hallucinated figures that follow him around, imaginary figures in his mind that pick on him and stuff, all I got to do is put some imaginary figures in his mind, in this case, me, right? Reminding him, that it's your brain and you can use it, and it's amazing when you look at the 3 sessions, one of the things I want you to do is to notice how clear Andy's mind is about what I told him to do. Because, here, you got to understand there's months between these sessions. And he said, well, when the problem started, I remembered, to push the pictures away. And you told me to do this and stuff. And in this last session, it's really impressive how much of a handle this guy is getting on accuracy of the things that occurred in the sessions. Each one, his perceptions become that much clearer. And I don't care what the doctors say. I know you can tell by looking at this guy from one film to the next that he's getting better. You don't cure, a paranoid schizophrenic, especially one that's on drugs, overnight. But you can make headway, and that's all you're ever doing with anybody anyway. It cures a normalization. And to me, what I want is a direction where you're getting better. And with this kid, I mean, in the beginning of the last session, his memory about what to do, and it's actually funny because he started to say that he had a certain problem. I said, fuck, we already did that last time. And he doesn't hesitate. He goes, you're right. He said, it just slipped my mind. I said, I forgot, that's right, I forgot to use my brain. And that his ability to do transderivational search, to bring it up, and to have it be contextualized, even though they still have him on drugs, because you know how much sense that makes. I had him take him off drugs for the first session, worked with him, and then they put him back on drugs, thereby giving him amnesia for most of the first session. I mean, they do that a lot. That's right, anchor the symptoms with the drug, and then give it to people every day. That's what I always say. Now, I pick and choose where I ask questions. I don't ask questions to do anything other than to set initially Andy off in directions. And then I'll literally stop and I'll make explanations to him. The explanations themselves, part of them is actually testing whether I have his metaprogram or not. And so as I ask him questions and explain things to him, about how you can actually run your own brain and take images and have him try things, that I'm finding out the difference between when I package information where he goes into justification and explanation as opposed to when he goes into behavior. Now, when you watch it, what you'll begin to notice is I do it. And again, you still use all the other patterns. You'll find lots of hypnotic communication, a lot of embedded commands. And that I find that a lot of people in their work do not emphasize enough unconscious communication. I want you to pay attention to how Andy sorts, his sorting principles, and how he deals with time. Now, as he discusses these entities like Mary that torture him and rag on him, I ask him a lot of when questions. Now, I ask him some submodality questions because I wanted to do demonstrations of submodalities on the tape. But a lot of the stuff that's really much more important, because I run through a thing where I work with the conscious mind for a while, and then I do trance work. And a lot of the conscious mind work is a setup for the trance. And that the pieces and the things that I talk about in the trance and the way in which I do literally training. I mean, I get down to the point where teaching him to control his mind, I have him literally make pictures of numbers so he can do something deliberate with his mind. learn to, because I mean, his mind was running so out of control, he had no concept of the fact that he could control what pictures were there. And getting him to be able to focus, I mean, there are things that are in that level that rote. But what's much important of having him do that is I set that up as an example because I wanted him to build a generalization that it was possible for him to control what went on in his mind. And one of the things that you'll see on the tape, undeniably, between the first one and the one we'll watch together tomorrow, is that he has the belief that he can control his mind. He even talks about it being a pain in the ass to have to do it. Having to stop and actually control his own brain, like having to do it 10 times, in the same day, and I mean, he thinks it's like, he said, it's like a job, and he should get paid for it. Really, I mean, he really says, and he does. And he even gets to the point in the third session where he starts making jokes about it. And I mean, if you look at him in the first session, how serious this kid is. And then in the last session, he's literally joking around with me. I mean, I actually missed one of the jokes because I was so used to taking him seriously. So when he said, because he's starting to go out like on Friday night, they go down to the mall and cruise for chicks. And, but they haven't actually talked to any of them yet, him and the guys that he lives with. It's nothing like 4 schizophrenics out cruising for chicks. Now, the thing I want you to watch primarily is I want you to watch for what kind of information I pick up, because I guarantee you'll see the generalization. And I mean, I do it every 5 ways from Sunday. I tell him about it, blatantly and consciously, and then I give him examples, and I make examples. And I make enough examples that I build in a generalization that it is possible for him to control what goes on in his brain. To the point where in the last session, he forgot, though. It slipped his mind to do it. He started to go off on this thing about how Mary, I said, wait a minute. I said, we already dealt with this last time. Remember, you can do this and you can, erase her and stuff. And he goes, damn it, I knew I forgot something. That's right. He said, when she yells at me, I can erase her mouth. Yeah, I remember. I said, yeah. And, I mean, it's not that he gets rid of all of these figures. And then he said, oh, and I forgot from the and he immediately remembers then. It's one of the things about taking all these damn drugs they got him on. But he actually, when I reminded him, about that thing, and he goes, oh, yeah, and smashing the TV set, too. I forgot that one. It's like, oh, yeah, I got to keep this stuff in my mind. So I made him write them down. Right? I figured if they're going to drug him out, he could write them down, and at least he can read them and remind himself that... as long, it's because, I mean, it's for him to get the state money, I guess he has to do what they say. I mean, being a schizophrenic is not an easy job. And it probably doesn't pay that well, but it's a living. In Andy's case, I want you to watch in particular, because one thing about paranoid schizophrenics is we know, I mean, what's a paranoid schizophrenic going to be? Is it going to be a matcher? Mismatcher? Well, you're going to have things where he's certainly going to disagree, and they say, but, you'll get the but, there's one thing you have to realize, and there's one thing you don't understand, a lot of those kind of phrases. And as you begin to do things, and like, I use a technique called overpowering people. Like, I go, don't give me this shit, come on, just do this, do that. And where I throw back the same kind of linguistic patterns I get from them, because people's own patterns work really good on them. They really do. When people start justifying things, like the one I pulled with this religious guy, is where he claimed that since he was smarter than the average person, he had to spend more time and had an obligation to spend more time, engaging in all of this, the religious study and stuff, because he could appreciate it more. And I turned around and I said, you really are smarter than most people? And he went, yeah. And I said, well, if you're smarter, then you should be able to do it faster. It shouldn't take you as long as other people, because you should be quicker on the brain. Used his own pattern right on him. And it's logic that's hard to argue with. It's not just logic itself, though. The presentation packaged it right inside his own program. So it was irresistible. The thing is when you put information into a system and it matches the system perfectly, it's absolutely irresistible. It's not that the information that you're putting is being forced through. It's that you can just put it out like bait. And if it's in the right package, it's irresistible. They want it. Okay, the other thing is I want you to notice how, as I ask I ask Andy questions. One of the things I'm trying to elicit is the length of time, because one of the things that I know about schizophrenics is schizophrenics really get lost in time a lot. I mean, you'd have to get lost in delusions of things, and to really be able to find out what the length and the chunk of time is, so that when I go back and I build in a generalization that says you can change your brain deliberately, you know, if you actually do it. Because, see, I mean, he told me from the first session to the second session, he said, yeah, he said, and I said, well, how's it going? He goes, well, he goes, that Mary's still there, you know. She's really a powerful one, Richard. It's so cute. I love this guy. You'll love this film. It's one of my favorite schizophrenics I've ever seen. He fascinated me. It was so cute about the way he did. Yeah, that Mary, you know, she's just real powerful. And he said, you know, because I remember that thing you did about taking the picture and pushing it away. And he said, and I'd push it away and it'd just come right back up, you know. And, but at least he did it. See, he learned that he could control his mind. At least he could do it, but he just couldn't hold it out there. Now, the thing is like it slipped his mind. There were other things he was supposed to do with it, but, you know. After the client session, he went back and they put him back on drugs, so I'm surprised he remembered as much as he did, actually. But one of the things you'll notice is that the way in which time is organized, the way in which he moves through time, because it's real in time, man, he gets into everything I have him do. And you watch, like when I did the first hypnosis thing, I knew he was scared about it, you know, because, you know, somebody had told him, and I knew, because he knew something about hypnosis was coming, you know. And he was real nervous about it at first. But boy, when you watch this guy get into it, man, you know, I had this thing, I had him come up and touch his face. And, you know, I kept having to say gently, because, you know, you don't touch his face, you start doing this. You know? And I mean, literally, he made his lip bleed. You can see it on the film. You know, just, you know, his hand was going to go through his face if I didn't stop him. But this guy gets so inside of things that he gets lost in them. And one of the things you'll notice is that I use that very mechanism to get him to be lost inside of being more competent. And you'll see right up to the end, where the end, or the piece you'll see tomorrow, I actually have him use delusions as a way of being more competent. And actually the idea was kind of his, because when I found out that he used the supermarket, he looked at going to the supermarket as an adventure, and it was an episode from Star Trek, and he's Captain Kirk driving the cart, you know, on his 5-year mission through, you know, the vegetable department. He is definitely an in-time person, and I want you to notice, because he can get lost in anything. But see, in-time people don't have to get lost. And one of the things is that in order for them to get that, they have to have some control mechanisms. And one of the control mechanisms that you'll find is that, because I built in more than one generalization, and I want you to watch and see what the others are, because I'm not subtle about it at all. One of the things is that you know, there's a lot of emphasis that's been placed in our field upon being able to do unconscious communication. And somehow or other, I find that it gets twisted in people where they leave out being overt and blunt, right? And, you know, the thing is that you can be as blunt as you want and still slide all the shit underneath. Because, you know, just the fact that you're talking about it doesn't mean they're going to recognize the rest of it. And that being real blunt with people is a very powerful thing, and you know, it shouldn't be, you know. And I think, especially a lot of people that have the therapeutic background, you know, we're taught to talk mumbo jumbo, and you know, not to really tell people to knock it off, you know. And I mean, you know, I get down with this kid, and I mean, I go, you just got to stop this shit. You have to knock this fucking shit off, or you're just going to waste your fucking life. And he go, yeah, I know what you mean. And then, you know, then I start with the unconscious stuff where I go, now! Like that, and I go, and then I literally go back and have him do things deliberately and overtly with his mind, making pictures of numbers and stuff. But I also want you to watch how those things are all part of building a system to get him to accept a generalization and to keep it. And you know, you literally can hear it as it goes from one film to the next, where it's something that he accepts. Like when I mentioned to him in the beginning of the third session, I said to him, you know, he started to talk about going back. And I said, hey, man, we already did this, didn't we? You know how to control your brain. And he goes, oh, yeah. He said, I can do it. But the fact that at least he believes he can do it doesn't mean he's always going to do it, but that at least he has a generalization that says that he can. And when I told him he was getting better, you know, he turned around and he looked at me and he said, yeah, I know. You know, and the other thing is because I want you to watch where his reference comes from, because this kid does not have external reference. I mean, you know, that's one of the things about being a paranoid. Paranoids aren't really apt to have an external reference. Is that he's got a good internal reference, but he doesn't have a good way to gauge it. So I mean, when he became convinced that these internal entities were real, you know, that this really was Mary, you know, he didn't think it was. And see, he gets to the point where he starts calling them imaginary. And you know, as you go through the films, you know, it's not you know, the figures or whatever. It's not Mary and Frank and George. He still talks to them because, you know, after all, they're his friends. That's what I told him, you know. And then, you know, but like all friends, they get bitchy sometimes. And then he can erase her mouth, because I use the Bugs Bunny cure with this guy. You all know what the Bugs Bunny cure is, right? Well, didn't you ever see that Bugs Bunny cartoon where the artist erases Bugs' tail and then his legs and then his mouth? He can't talk. With people whose internal images are running wild, I teach them the Bugs Bunny cure, to put a big pencil in there. And to start, you know, because if you erase the mouth, then they can't talk, right? And the thing is it's to get people, see, the nice thing about that cartoon is it shows you who's controlling it. And when you have people write things in their mind and control things in their mind and do things deliberately, where they become the artist and they start taking control over their imagery. I do that a lot with people that scare the shit out of themselves all the time. There's a lot of cases that I had of people, you know, where they make pictures and just literally scare themselves shitless. And they can't control them. They make pictures of faces and the faces start distorting all over the place. And they think they're going crazy, which they are. Which is always the thing that blows them out, and people go, and I think I'm going nuts. And I look at them and I go, you are. Because at least once they get nuts, then they can get better. See, a lot of people keep trying to tell them they're not going crazy. And they are going crazy. In fact, they are crazy. So now they can stop. Right? Now. So, let us continue. Don't you love punctuation ambiguity? I want you to really, like, one of the things you'll find is really nice when you know this stuff, is to really go in and look at the ambiguity sections and patterns of the hypnotic technique of Milton H. Erickson of Arizona. And if you look at scope ambiguity and punctuation ambiguity, they really, if you add tempo to those things, are incredibly powerful. Now, so when you learn to use them well, you'll just be so surprised. How'd you guys enjoy the film? Did you like that film? Yeah. Isn't he a wonderful schizophrenic?
Which one? Which one? They both are.
Yeah, he didn't change too much from the first film to the second film, did he? Looked exactly the same. Really wasn't using his head, though. If you're going to have people come off the television and follow you around, I really think you should watch the Playboy channel. So what kinds of things did you notice? Tell me about Andy. She began. Did you see that there's lots and lots of different levels that I operate on when I see a client? I mean, everything from just straight direct command to, you know, to subtler things ranging from, you know, different forms of anchoring. And of course, unconscious communication. I do lots of that before I do the trance work. See, I noticed that a lot of people don't start doing hypnotic communication until they put somebody in trance. And it seems to me that that makes it a lot more difficult. One of the things I always found fascinating about what Milton did is that Milton always stacked presuppositions, that you were going to go into a deep trance before you did. When I was down there one time, there was a gentleman that had come to see Milton, and it was actually, he had reserved the time, but being the kind of person I was, I told him that he wouldn't mind if we stayed. I said, of course, use presuppositions. I went, since you don't mind if we stay, we'll just sit right here. And Milton's office is very, very small. And at the time, he had 2 folding chairs in it, and 1 chair which was obviously the trance chair. And of course, then his desk chair. And they wheeled Milton in. We were all 3 standing there, and they wheeled Milton in and dumped him in the chair. And immediately, John and I sat down in the 2 folding chairs, right? And the guy furtively looked around, and he became very, very nervous. I mean, this guy was scared. I don't know why, but people were terrified of Milton. And I figured you didn't have to worry that much. He could have crippled, you know. What could he do with just mere words? And so this guy looks at me and he goes, would you like to sit over there? And I went, no. And he looked at John, and John went like this. And the guy looked at the chair like this, and Milton looked up at him, and he got this big beatific smile and a little glimmer in his eye. And he says to him, he goes, that's the chair you're going to sit all the way into a trance. Now. The guy just went, And as the guy sat, when he got halfway down, Milton went, deep trance. That moment, you know, where you're falling, where you can't stop. And it was like the guy tried to hold himself. Like, oh, no, I'm going. Oh, no. But anyway, what other kinds of things did you notice? Did you notice also that I went through a lot of work to install a generalization in him? That, because, see, part of course, being schizophrenic is that you're passive. It's, you know, that in relationship to your own brain. And one of the generalizations I wanted to build in him was that he could be active. Because of the variables, some of these things are more alterable and malleable than others, and without really messing things up. And of course, if you're a paranoid schizophrenic too, you have to stop and think about it, and things aren't going to get much worse. You know, I hear a lot of this talk for years about where the psychiatrists are worried about them because they're borderline. And if they're severely episodic anyway, you know, I figure, I mean, there are theories that actually will take them in and take them out the other side. I've always found that, you know, that if you begin to work with these people and begin to give them some what I call floor handles, that's where when everything is just totally, you're so drunk you can't do anything, can't stay on your bar stool, and the room is starting to spin, and you're down on the floor, you think things can't get any worse, and you think they might, you get something to hold on to. We're actually going to manufacture these for a while, so I know a lot of people that need them for their lives in general. That by giving them some floor handles, that is some things that they can hold on to, and also something that, not just with schizophrenics, but with everybody, one of the things that's real important is I want them to have some successes, because I use those as the foundation of beginning to get motivation and to get hope out of people. That most of the people are so discouraged, especially if they've been through a lot of therapy, they've tried to overcome their problems, that I want them to be able to do something that they never thought they could do. And I try to make that as pleasant as I can. If I can, I'll make it unpleasant, but I want them to succeed, because I use that as the foundation right inside their convincer strategy to begin to install generalizations which are going to be more useful. Typically ones about having more control, especially over their brain and their lives. And I'll tell you, you know, when you start doing this, you have to use somebody's metaprogram and literally beat it into them. You know, you put it through every which way, 5 ways from Sunday, consciously, unconsciously, waking state, trance state, put it everywhere you can. Now, especially with people who are real disassociated and have lots of different states of consciousness, you know, where you feel like you're meeting a group instead of an individual. One of the things is you're going to want to install generalizations across states, which means you're just going to have to do it more than once. And you'll have to induce different states to be able to do it. Now, what other kinds of things did you notice? What were you struck by with the film?
I was struck that he could do so much. That he actually did. How slowly he got it straight that he could do them.
Yeah, if you give them, you have to give good explanations, and sometimes more than once. And of course, at first, it was tough for him.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he was really straining. He had beads of sweat coming off of his forehead, but he got a handle on it. I mean, and by taking him through it, I mean, I was real impressed with him. He was a worker too.
Wasn't he? Yes.
Yeah, he was a worker, and you know, one of the things about you know, about having the structures that it takes to be a paranoid schizophrenic is that you are somewhat self-referential, and I mean, you may hallucinate what's going on about the rest of the world, but your convincer strategy is very strong. It's one of the reasons why it's hard to talk them out of being paranoid. You know, lots of times people try to convince someone that there isn't a conspiracy, and of course they just look at them and realize that you must be part of it. But I mean, they have very, very strong convincer strategies. In fact, the very reason that it doesn't take much data to convince them is one of the things that makes them a little easier to work with. Because if you can convince them of things, that things will be helpful to them and useful to them, and also don't argue with them about stuff, which is, you know, if you have a polarity responder, you know, why waste your time saying, these aren't real, you know. It's much better to just get them into it and have them start moving it around. That as long as they can start doing things with their internal processes, then it becomes a lot easier to convince them that they can control it. What other kinds of things? What did you notice? Come on, guys. Wake up now.
Also, he didn't get into a conflict with you, which interested me a lot in the sense that when he produced his great analysis, he suddenly said, you know, it's all because I had this in my child, and he's starting to give you the stuff which he got from the long psychiatric history, and you didn't exactly zap him for it, but you didn't let him go on with it, and he accepted to change the rules of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Well, the thing is one, I didn't disagree with it.
right.
You know, but I also didn't give it much credence. I just went, well, you know,
Well, that's
that's
something.
that's well and fine, but that has nothing to do with what we're doing here, rather than saying that's wrong.
Yeah, that must
Uh,
yes, that's it.
I mean, you have to admit, this guy's got more terminology than most of the shrinks I've
Yes,
ever.
he did a beautiful analysis.
He did a beautiful analysis. I thought he should get a psychiatric degree.
Yeah.
Schizophrenics live in a very small world. And in order to maintain, it's one of the things I got from studying Cantor's books on schizophrenia. He was, I mean, this guy spent so much time with schizophrenics that I was always impressed, because he was more descriptive than most of rather than trying to come up with reasons and causes. You know, out of the people that were doing this kind of work in the 50s, I was always struck by the first paragraph in the chapters of one of his books, where he described that what schizophrenia is somebody that lives in a small, tight, and consistent world and is able to maintain it in the face of all therapeutic help.
Right. But you got in.
Well, yeah, but see, the thing is that one of the things that I do is I keep expanding their schizophrenic world as well. Because you see, if you can make it bigger and richer, then you also have room for paradox as well. And for a greater range of activity, just for the person to perform it. It's not enough to take things which are a cue for something and just make them a cue for something else. You have to make them meaningful, because that's one of the things. Like, I had a schizophrenic that had meaningful messages off of license plates. Which, this occurred, by the way, just at the time in California that they were switching over to personalized plates. I mean, you know, it's one of those fortuitous things that I love, you know. So we got him a plate that said, "Stop it." It was our present to him. You know, so, and we put him on his car. We put him on his car when he was in my office. And I used to have, when I was up in Bonnie Doon, when I lived up there, my office was in the back on the 3rd story. It had a great big huge window, you know, big, 10 feet long and 6 feet high. And so I put him in trance. And while he was in trance, his car was parked right outside. And I had a friend of mine go out, take him off, put the plates on, and so that when he came up, he looked down at his license plate and got a meaningful message. That this is the kind of stuff where see, I don't think that, for my part, that I see that the kind of compassion that I see that people have for somebody who has really severe problems, what it seems to lack is, for number one, a sense of humor.
Yes.
Because I don't think that these people, see, I think if you play with them, you get further. And also, they're more willing to go along with it, because they spend so much time being serious, and because they really have bad cases of seriousness. Because you have to understand, I mean, you know, they get so wrapped up in this stuff that when you start playing, it actually clears the filters in their mind a little bit. You know, when they start to feel better, and you just play around with them a little bit and tease them. One of the things I want you to notice is that it's initially he doesn't actually look quite as good right in the beginning, but a few minutes into the session, kind of comes out of it. He's a little spaced. Before we started, he was the first client. He was just kind of wandering around, and stuff. But as soon as he started getting going, one of the things is he starts to get a little chutzpah going. He starts cracking jokes with me, and it's funny. I mean, he's very opinionated too, which is one of the things I like about him. He has very, very strong opinions. So of course, most people would end up fighting with that. Whereas what I want to know is, how did he make one? Because if you can find out how he makes an opinion, then you can make one. And and by working on opinions such as he can control things, has a little bit of memory problem. I mean, one of the things that I have him do in this session is I have him write stuff down, because he forgets a lot. And of course, that's not just a byproduct of his state; it's a byproduct of the drugs they give him. But it's a trade-off. Give him drugs, he gets a place to live. And as he calls them, his meds. When he goes down to the mall to pick up his meds. I mean, it sounds like a doctor to me most of the time, just with his speech. But he really did have more affect. He looked a lot better. I mean, it's not by any means that everything was all over. I mean, the thing that's most important to me is that you set up directions with people. It's not so much that you get it all done. See, when you do change work that has to do with an in-time problem, where there's a contextual marker and it fires it off, and it's episodic. But when people have all kinds of little problems, there's overriding processes that are going on by which they generalize from events. And if you move a direction towards getting better, I even talked to him about, I work on building the generalization that he's getting better in this session, because, and he consults with me on this and agrees. He really is. He said, he says, well, he says to me, he says, that's what I thought too. So anyway, let me start this here. So, well, how you been doing?
Well, I've been, in some areas I've been doing all right, but in others...
Well, what's gotten better? Let's start there.
Well, most of the time when I experience, say, rage, I usually stick to the running. Or I tear up, stuff that I, don't need anymore.
Telephone books and stuff like that, or?
No phone books. Stuff like empty plastic shopping bags.
There's a thought. So what's gotten better? So what's gotten better is that when you feel rage, that you've stuck to taking it out on inanimate objects?
Yeah, but, most of the time, though, not all the time.
No, well, I don't do it all the time that way either.
Well, I guess nobody does.
Yeah.
Well, my socializations and outings have gone a lot better, too.
Well, like what kind of things have gone better?
Well, like I, go out with friends to, to one of their employers, and we have, dinner where they work, or where the friend works.
Is that something you wouldn't have been able to do before?
Maybe, it could, maybe so, because
Well,
the first time I was
you got to tell me.
invited
I don't know. I wasn't there.
Right.
Stop. What I wanted to point out here is that one of the things that I go right into here is just I literally start with the presupposition that things are getting better. And what I'm going to do is, as he attempts to answer the question, what I'm going to look for is what kind of generalizations exist that would lead him back into shitty stuff. See, in other words, to maintain the world where you believe that things are going to get worse, it's like, as he pointed out when he said, well, things are, some ways better and some ways, it's not perfect. It's like when you do, any of you have ever done any body work, one of the things that amazes me is that I've done things where I've taken people who had their arm is like paralyzed, right? 45 minutes later, they can move it around and stuff, and they'll look at me and they'll say, yeah, but if I take it and I go like this, it still hurts a little bit right here. Now, there's a thing where what's happened inside of somebody that's been physically injured, where their mind sets up a tracking to look for what's wrong. And a lot of the training and the stuff that's been grilled into him is to look for how he's fucked up, to look for what's wrong with it, you know, to examine his socializations for where they're inappropriate. And what I want to do is I want to start installing in him a thing that starts to identify what's getting better so he can build on his strength. And given, as you'll see, given the nature of the kind of training, you can watch it coming back up and back up and back up. I mean, he even like, you know, is so sorting for problems. He sorts for one he doesn't have anymore. But I was told before the session he doesn't have problems with. And he brings it up, and then I reminded him he didn't, and he went, oh yeah, you're right. You know, because he's so used to the minute you're in a session, you know, examining the things that aren't working rather than examining the things that are and going with them.
I wasn't,
Is that bothering you?
well, the only reason it's bothering me is because it's touching me. That's one area that has not gone better.
Okay, well,
So I'll just have to hold it like this.
so it doesn't touch you?
Mm-hmm.
What will happen if it touches you?
I will be feeling teased by, once again, Mary.
Mm-hmm. What happens? Do you see
Excuse me.
when
Go
it
ahead.
touches you? Well, let go of it for a second. Let's find out how this works. Just let go of it for a second. Does she pop out suddenly and start teasing you?
Well, she is she's smiling at me. I hear some song that goes, "Want me, don't you want me to touch you and to hold you tight?" You know. That's one thing. Or phase. I mean, I've never.
In that snotty tonality, too? Kind of tonality you were just using where it's that kind of...
Could be something like that.
Yeah, well, it could be. The question is, what is it?
Yeah.
Let me stop you for a second. Do you remember the last time when we were doing something together where I had you go inside? Because, see, is Mary teasing you right now?
Not at the moment.
Okay, well, if she starts, will you let me know?
All right.
Okay. Now, then let me get back to a couple of other things. What I want to know is first, I want to know which things have gotten better.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. For example, there were certain things that used to bother you. For example, dogs.
They still bother me.
Dogs still bother you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and what happens when you see a dog?
I feel once again that Mary put that there to set me up so that I'd have to face it and, you know.
That Mary puts dogs around the world?
Well, the rest of the world is far enough away for me to be unaffected by it, but
Yeah.
it's just, you know, I still have trouble with dogs, though.
With dogs. How about guys with long hair?
Same thing.
They still bother you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and what happens when you see one?
I feel revulsed.
Yeah.
My mind thinks, my God, I don't believe it. There's still all these long-haired freaks even though it's the 1980s.
It's funny, that's about what I think. Yeah, how's that a problem?
Well,
Don't you find it amusing at all? That some people don't know what year it is?
No, I guess I don't find it really amusing.
Okay. Well, how does it annoy you? You seem to be letting an awful lot of things bother you somehow.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. But another way is that problems I have, are still eating at me.
Well, that's another way of looking at it, but are the problems eating at it, or are you doing it yourself?
How would I be doing it myself?
Well, it seems to me, remember when you were here last time we did things like when you stopped and you looked at a dog?
Uh-huh.
And you made it so it didn't bother you. Do you remember that?
I may have done something like that, but I don't quite remember it.
You don't quite remember it.
Yeah.
Do you kind of remember it? See, if you pay attention to the modifiers that people use in their language, so if he says, well, I don't quite remember it, then all I got to do is feed it back. Well, but do you kind of remember it? And see, with him, all these modal operators of possibility, which with this guy you hear all through his language, really allow you because, but since he throws them out as being acceptable, that means when you throw them back, they are acceptable. You know, if I were to say to him, well, you know, you can't look at it that way, then he would abreact. Where if I go, well, you can kind of look at it this way, and if I say, well, he says I don't quite remember, and I do, and I say, well, do you kind of remember? And then he goes, yeah, and then I'll go, then I can lead him in, and watch how quickly he can get it all right back.
Yeah, I do right now.
Okay, well, if you're capable of doing it, then the thing is that it seems to me that if you can do it once, then you would be able to do it in other situations.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what a challenge is, Andy?
Yeah, I think I know, but you go ahead and tell me.
No, what is a challenge a good thing?
As in a good thing for me, or what?
Well, for you. Is there any challenges that you like to undertake?
Well, Well,
For example, what kind of things do you like to do? What things do you enjoy? Like, do you enjoy reading?
Yeah, I enjoy reading.
Okay. Has there ever been a challenge for you to read anything? Either because it was difficult to read or because it was long?
Well, when I read, it's usually, fun things and, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Like what kind of stuff do you like to read?
Well, I like to read science fiction, for one thing.
Okay. Now, when you read science fiction stories, do some of the characters inside of those novels undertake to do things which are challenging?
Yes.
Okay. What do you think motivates them to do that?
Let's see, let me see if I can give a specific example.
All right.
I have a story. Where a girl has this boyfriend she's deeply in love with.
Mm-hmm.
The boyfriend's dad, got a job as the script writer, and he and his family would have to move out to California. And the boyfriend and the girlfriend would have to be apart from each other, and it was something the girlfriend, at first she came up with a solution that maybe the boyfriend could stay at her uncle's.
Mm-hmm.
Then when she asked her uncle, she got some more bad news. The uncle couldn't pay enough money for the mortgage of that apartment and his record store, so he'd have to move away too. And the only thing that could stop it is that the girl would have to go back to the year 1956 and get a photograph of Elvis Presley holding this guitar and bring it back to the 1980s. So, and that would be worth a lot. And so the girl's uncle could keep the store in his place, and Ethan could stay there. That's the name of the boyfriend. And so that's how that problem was solved.
So did she do it? Did she undertake the challenge of going back through time?
Yes, she did.
Okay. Now, did that strike you as exciting when you read about that?
Yes, it felt good and fun to read about that.
Okay. How about doing something like that?
I've thought of stuff like that too. Let's see. Not only is reading challenging for me, but watching certain TV programs.
Well, I was thinking about the challenge that she undertook. She undertook to do something that where, in essence, she conquered a problem.
Right.
Okay. Now, it seems to me that one of the things that you have going for you is that you have a lot of challenges ahead of you.
Uh-huh.
Now,
And what are some of those challenges?
well, one of those challenges is that, see, I seem to have memory. To tell you the truth, I'm a little bit disappointed. Because when you were sitting here, you were able to deal with a problem where you looked at a dog, and you could take a breath and look at it and go, "That's a dog. So what?" So that wasn't a big issue. You see, there's really two kinds of things in life. There's ones that are fun, and ones that are a pain in the ass.
Uh-huh.
Now, when you undertake something and you deal with a problem as a challenge, it becomes something that's fun to do. It's like when you read about the heroes in the books that you read.
Oh, like that lady time traveler?
Yeah. She was somebody that when she saw a problem, she just kicked the shit out of it. She did something about it.
Right.
Instead of worrying about it and letting it get the best of her.
Uh-huh.
Now, there are a couple of things that we did here last time that were techniques that were things that had to do with you being in control of your own brain.
Right.
Now, if you close your eyes for a minute and think back to how it felt for you to be able, there's a dog sitting in front of you, and you looked at it and took a deep breath, relaxed, and went, "It's a dog. So what?"
Yeah.
Now, being able to beat that challenge. Now, the other thing you did is if you close your eyes, and remember, one of the things you did is you took a picture of Mary.
Uh-huh.
And you did things like you took the artist's pencil in your mind and just erased her head and put a giraffe's head on it.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
You remember doing that?
Yeah. Now I do.
Now, if you stop and do that right now. Can you do that in your head now?
Okay.
Now, if Mary was like bugging you,
Yeah, go ahead.
singing a song, "If you want me, nah, nah," starting to get on your case, and that started, instead of it getting to you, you took a deep breath and turned around and said in your mind, "Okay, bitch, this is the way it's going to go." Pull out your artist's pencil and simply erased her mouth. Something that all women fear in life. Trust me.
Right.
A fate worse than death. Something most guys fear too.
Uh-huh.
That what would happen is that you would take control of the internal things, the internal world that in essence is the challenge that you've got ahead of you.
Mm-hmm.
Because you see, every day when you get up, you can let these things get to you or you can do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care, there isn't any psychiatrist in the world, there isn't any therapist in the world that can do something about your brain. The only person that can do anything about it is you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you can start taking it and changing your attitude about it, you can turn your whole life around.
Uh-huh.
But you got to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know that if I sat here, you could probably bring up a whole bunch of different things that bother you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I'm asking you is to attack the other part of it. The thing is if you ain't having enough fun, I found out then you have time for problems. Does that make sense?
That's a very good point. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is when I started to ask you about what your success was, you started to tell me about the things that weren't working.
Yeah, because your initial question was, what things have improved? What things in my life have gotten better?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, what things in your life have gotten better?
And I found that a hard question for me to answer, really.
Well, yeah, but you see, that's the whole point, though, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Seems to me that we should be getting down to the things that are getting better, and if not, those are challenges. Just like every story you read, there's somebody in it that has a challenge they have to face.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the people that get the most out of life are the ones that look at things and when something occurs that's a problem, instead of going, oh,
This is something terrible.
Yeah.
Instead of an adventure, that's my terminology for it.
Yeah. The thing about building in a generalization is, is because if he's that self-referential, as I began to talk about disassociated, about people, I even made a gesture like this, about people that do it this way. That's a test to find out, did the generalization get in? See? First I've got to do, first I'm doing a content reframe, where you reframe, you give them, here are your choices, things are going well, or you have a lot of challenges. Okay? Now, in his world and with him, things are black and white. I mean, they're this or they're that. So I kept presenting things to him as if there was no middle ground. And when you get down to making things either or in his case, and you put one half of it on other people, then he is going to accept that he is the other half. And that's the way the generalization slid in. That's the way in which suddenly now he looks at problems as an adventure. Anytime any one of these things bother you, or any of this mental stuff, because you got a lot of things, you got years and years of practice. Now you got to think about it this way. If you practice for years doing something, it's a little hard to stop. I mean, just think about it. That, there's an old story that a friend of mine used to tell about an animal that was kept in a small cage.
Right.
And it would pace around in that cage, and at a certain point in time, they removed the cage, but the animal still walked around like the cage was still there.
Another example is like sitting in a jail cell, not knowing that the door was unlocked.
Well, yeah, after a certain number of years, you might not even try it to find out. Now, the thing is that what I want to do today is to work on something which might be a little different for you, because I mean, I keep hearing that you have rage. Of course, I haven't seen it, so I don't know for sure, but
It's true, but go ahead.
well, I'll take your word for it.
Okay.
Trust me, I don't need. I get people yelling at me all the time. I don't need any of that. But the thing is that what it tells me is that at least you're a guy that's got plenty of energy.
Right.
Because I'll tell you, you don't want to know what the worst clients of all are.
Of yours or of any?
Of mine. I don't know about anybody else, what they like and dislike. But I'll tell you, the worst clients of all are the ones that are apathetic, that have no energy. The ones that sit around and go, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then you say, well, try this. And they go, well, but if I did, then this. See, what I think you can do is to take all this rage and begin to turn it around and make it into something productive. Because it seems to me that the things that are making you mad in the world to the point where you want to tear up plastic bags, the only thing is that tearing up plastic bags don't pay well.
How do they not pay well?
No, it doesn't. You don't get paid for tearing up plastic bags, do you?
No, I don't. I guess there's no jobs that require that kind of experience.
Well, I thought about it, I mean, after I watched wrestling on TV, I thought if they get paid for that, you'd get paid for anything. But what I was thinking of is that one of the first things is that if you can take it and turn it around to the point where the most important thing in the world to you is conquering the fact that it bothers you. First internally in your head, and then on the outside. Because you see, the thing is seems to me you should be out looking for dogs.
How's that?
Well, so you could walk up to them and make sure that it doesn't bother you. Because otherwise, there's always going to be dogs sneaking around in the world looking for you. Whereas if you can make it so that it doesn't bother you anymore, go out of your way to make it. Just like this girl went back into the 50s to make sure that there was no problem. It seems to me that you could go out, and it could kind of be your job at first, so to speak.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what I have in mind. Now, for example, what do you do to have fun? What are you looking at him for?
Maybe I was unconsciously seeking his support.
Well, boy, I'll tell you, you sure got the psychiatric training.
Yeah, I've had years of experience.
Yeah, that's true. They should probably give you a degree.
Maybe, yeah.
But I mean, what are you doing to make it so that you enjoy life? So that life is more of an adventure? Like, where do you live now?
Yeah. I don't know if I could give the specifics of the location. but
Well, you don't want,
let's just-
we don't want the address. I mean, you know. I mean, do you live at home or?
Well, I do live in a house
Well,
with some other guys.
so you live in a house with the other guys.
Right.
Do any of them have long hair?
Not really.
Okay. All right. So that's another thing that you got to go out and do is to go out and see guys with long hair. And what about a sense of humor? You got one of those?
Yeah, I still use that from time to time. I still have the old phrases like "This ain't gonna cut it, bud," and that U.S. highway sign jingle. Probably don't know about that, but
Well, if it's something that makes it so life is more amusing rather than life tortures you, then it seems to me it's useful.
yeah.
Now, for example, what kind of things would set you off into a rage? What kinds of things make it so that life is more uncomfortable for you?
Well, let's see. When I try to go someplace during the day,
Like
I
what?
know that.
Just any time you try to go someplace during the day?
Yeah, I'm using so much energy, fighting with the things that trigger, the imaginary figures. I have looked at it and said that I'm expending as much energy doing this as more, so-called normal people do in a 9-to-5 job.
I would say probably more so.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. But these are simple things like trying to deposit a check in a bank or trying to withdraw money or that type of thing.
Well,
Or
how
going
much?
shopping.
I mean, how much energy does it take to be able to go in your mind and just erase these figures? From the time you leave your house to the time you deposit the check, right? Okay, so there are various things that trigger the figures in your mind, but once they get there, how long does it take to, take an eraser with a pencil in your head and just erase their heads and put a caret on top of each figure? So you got to use a little creativity here.
Yeah.
If you want to get control of these things, unless you want it, if you want them to hang around and torture you. I know
I
guys
guess
that,
that's up to me, huh?
well, hey, look, at my rate, you can't afford me to follow you around.
That's right.
But these are things we talked about. The thing is, all right, let's say you were leaving here. It's daytime,
Right.
okay? You were going to go to the bank and deposit a check.
Uh-huh.
Okay, now, what would happen? What would be one of the things that would trigger off these imaginary figures? Like if somebody came up and touched you, would that do it?
Well, yeah, I'd say if somebody came up and touched me like that
Yeah.
and said, "Excuse me," I'd go, "Ah," and run away.
You would go, and run away?
Yeah, that happened to me a week ago tomorrow.
A week ago tomorrow. Don't put me in a trance, Andy. It's early in the day for me.
No, well, it was.
It
let's just say
happened
it was
a week
last
from now
Friday,
yesterday.
okay?
Okay. But, all right, so if somebody walked up to you and they went boom and they touched you like that, does it trigger off in your mind the imaginary figures?
Well, Mary would be triggered.
All right, so when Mary's triggered, what's the first thing you can do to shut her up?
Huh.
See, you know what I want you to do? I want you to sit back and try something for a second. You know what? You need a little bit of attitude. Do you know what an attitude is?
Yes, I do.
You know what I mean by an attitude.
Right.
All right, now, I've imagined from time to time you have gotten an attitude on. But in terms of dealing with this stuff inside your mind, I think one of the things you need is to stop and just close your eyes for a minute here. Just sit back, close your eyes, take a deep breath and relax.
Okay.
And I want you to make a picture of Mary in your mind, but make it a small picture and out at a distance.
Uh-huh.
And I want you to look at her, and I want you to say in your most macho tonality inside your head, "You're mine this time, bitch."
Yeah.
Now, doesn't that make you feel like you have a slightly different attitude?
Yeah.
Okay, now, I want you to imagine in your mind a pencil eraser,
Uh-huh.
right? And I want you to, a big pencil eraser,
Yeah.
bigger than Mary.
Right.
And to know that you can take that eraser, you can change the way she looks, you can change her head, or you can just simply erase it. Now I want you to do something else. I want you to look up in the corner of your mind's eye and literally peel the corner off, like turning the page in a book, and literally turn the page until you, and on the next page I want it to be blank.
Uh-huh.
Can you do that?
Yeah, I've already done that.
All right, good. Okay, again, I'm going back and associating with the example of reading and taking things that are there to, again, starting to build a generalization. But he can do something about this. He can go fuck it. So that he can begin to take things and pay attention to what it is that he can do, not to what it is that he can't do. This is part of how you build generalizations that last. Now, come on back here. Look at me.
Right.
Now, the thing is when something triggers off in your mind one of these figures, one of the things is that initially, what I want you to do is I want you to go looking for it. It's time for Andy to go, I want you. Do you ever see Rocky 3 or Rocky 2, wherever it is?
I've seen Rocky 4, but go ahead.
The one where Mr. T goes, I want you, you're mine, I want you, you're mine, Balboa.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, this is kind of the attitude I want you to have. What I want you to do is just think of what the hell, somebody walks up to you in a crowd, because, I mean, let's face it, from a very practical point of view, you know, basically in terms of biology and everything else, you ain't all that different from me.
Right.
Now, if we were going to be psychoanalytical about it, we could say there was obviously certain things about your growing up which was different than mine, which may be an advantage in some ways and a disadvantage in others. But the point is if somebody walks up and touches you like that when you're outside, there's no need for it to make any difference. Now, if they walk up and punch you in the mouth, then I want you to notice. You know, if they walk up and grab a hold of your wallet, I want you to turn around, you know, and do what I do, grab a hold of their nose or their ear. Which ear's a marvelous part of the body, and you go, hey, don't touch my wallet.
Yeah.
Now, but if somebody just walks up and touches you like this, I want it for you to be no big deal. So the first thing is since these things used to trigger those figures off, what I want you to do is to make a list for yourself. Actually, do we have some paper and pencil here? Seems Andy has a little problem with his memory, so we're going to write it down this time. How much time do you spend with your brother? Do you spend much time with him?
Well, we spend Saturday together, and that's about it, with the exception of special occasions like Mother's Day or birthdays or holidays.
So, good. Saturdays will be fine. So I'm gonna get your brother to help you. I want you guys to go out looking for trouble. That's what brothers should do anyway. That's what I always wanted a brother for, was to go out and get in trouble with. I always had to do it all by myself, you know.
You were an only child, Richard?
Well, not exactly. I have a sister. I just didn't grow up with my sister. But she got in so much trouble by the time I came along that there wasn't any left for me. I had to make my own. Now, what we want to do is we want to start to make a list of what kinds of things would, like, between the time you left your house and the time you deposited the check in the bank, what kinds of things are turning this into a job? Now, I have to admit, I'm not big on going to the bank. You know, it's not one of my favorite places. You know, if I say on one hand, you know, I could go out and party, and on the other hand, I have to go to the bank, and I go like this, you know, party definitely wins. But if
you know, the people in the bank are nice. I've always got a lot of nice, supportive ladies to, you know, help me, and not just in the bank situations either.
That's one of the places I never tried to pick up chicks, I have to admit.
I wouldn't pick up any girls, but, well, you see what
You wouldn't? All right, we'll put that on the list. Pick up girls. There's plenty of them in the world. You don't have to keep.
That's true.
You don't have to keep them for a long time. Sometimes 2 or 3 minutes is plenty. Believe me.
Excuse me, could I have about 50 years of your time?
Nah, trust me. Don't start there, Andy.
Yeah.
You know, of course, you pick up a woman for 50 years, there's certain prerequisites. One is you have a job.
Yeah.
Do you work, Andy, by the way?
No, not really. I'm trying to prepare myself to be a writer, but I only write little bits of the story at a time, so. Yeah.
It's a fragment story writer. There's not much call for that yet. You have to get to short stories before you can sell them. Actually, magazines buy a lot of short stories.
Yeah.
So I've discovered there's a lot of fiction in things like Time Magazine and Newsweek. Now, I'll tell you what else would set you off? In other words, if somebody came up and touched you, right? That would be one thing, right?
Right.
All right. Now, okay, so what should we call that? Random physical contact.
Yeah.
Sounds so intellectual when you say it that way.
Right.
Or bumping into somebody.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So one of the things that we're going to want is literally to find out whether this is true. I want you to go out and not bump into, but not rough, but I mean gently, bump into a few strangers, find out if it sets this stuff off in your head. And what I want you to do is to think of it as a challenge. You know, when you get up in the morning, you're going to look in the mirror and you're going to walk over and it's going to be, you know, look in the mirror and see yourself the same way Rambo does. You know, that you got a whole day ahead of you of challenges. And that you're going to beat them now. Because I don't know about you, but if going to the bank was that much trouble, it makes life hard work.
It's true. Yeah.
It doesn't need to be. But the first thing you got to do is you got to kick the shit out of all the things. And, you know, it's not, instead of trading one for this one, or, you know, or you get rid of this one and you lose ground here, it's, you know, it's time, you know, for it to become Anbo. Get up in the morning.
Anbo, I've called myself that too, you know?
That's just a guess. See, now what I'm starting to do is to take the generalization. What I want to do is I want to aim it into behavior. And, I mean, with lots and lots of the clients I see, I give them lists. You know, have them put it on, attach it on the mirror, or if I have somebody around that can bug them to do it, of things that they have to go out, where they really go out and conquer problems. Because one of the things is, like, if some of you have ever done the phobia cure with somebody, had them come back a week later and ask them if they've gone in an elevator. And they said, well, no. You go, well, you know, when you were here, it didn't bother you. And they go, yeah, but, you know, it's not like I went out looking for it. And to me, that's one of the things that I want out of a client. I want him to go look for it. Now, the thing with Andy is that right now, I'm taking the fact that he's a polarity responder, that he has an internal reference. Now, how about time? You guys been paying attention to how does Andy deal with time? Because he oscillates. He's a little tricky.
He goes from past to present.
Yeah, it's a between time person, you know, because he's never really where he is. It's part of what you do when you're schizophrenic. And that so what I'm doing is setting up between time tasks for him, right? Because now he's going to become Anbo. Now, as long as he has delusions, you might as well make him have good ones, and useful delusions that get him to go out and be a mind warrior, so to speak. Literally, you know, is what we'll do is we'll make a list of all the things you can think of, and it's time for you to go and just take care of them. Okay, because if I touch you like this, does Mary pop into your head?
No, at least not right now.
Okay, well,
it didn't. All right.
all right, it didn't. All right, so it means that it doesn't have to. Now, all right, let's say she did. Okay, what are you going to do? What are you going to do if she does? What if I reached over and touched you suddenly and she went, popped into your head? What are you going to do about it? You going to take that shit? Shit, imagine if you lived in Manhattan, you know, going to the bank. Do you know how many times she'd be popping into your head between the time you left your house, the time you got to the bank? You know, 552 million times. That would, you know, to be like your life's work would be to go and cash one check.
That's right.
Now, even though you live in Colorado and it's not that bad, you don't need that shit.
No.
And if you're walking along and you bump into somebody like that, you don't need that to be a problem, do you?
No.
Just, isn't there more interesting things in life to deal with?
Yeah. Richard,
Yeah.
I gotta say this. This might answer your initial question of what things are going straight. Now, all right. Now, the shopping area where I go is University Hills in Denver. Say if I go to University Hills.
Yeah.
Say if I want to pick up some of my meds or
You still
like I
taking meds?
Well, I'll continue.
Yeah, but go ahead. We'll get back to that.
Well, see,
So you're going to pick up some meds.
or, go to the mini bank. Now, at first, I would experience trouble. But then, I would see all these nice-looking ladies in the mall and in the stores, and I get a shot of social courage. I mean, I haven't gotten to the point yet where I would go up and introduce myself to anybody, but at least, it helps me to cope better by making myself feel good, and that's happened to me, quite a few times lately.
All right.
And
It's ENBO.
right. And another specific case is the Albertsons when I go grocery shopping. You were talking about my liking to read books. I think watching television is the same thing for me.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes, like in the store, I think of like I'm in a certain episode of, say, Star Trek. Not instead of like Rambo, it's more like Captain Kirk, and it's like an episode. Maybe I pretend that I'm Kirk with another crewman, and I'm in this secret base, and I'm risking getting captured by the people who are guarding it, and we have to get out in time, and that type of thing. So that's and it has started to become fun in that area. I think that's something you should know.
Well, now it's time for your missions, Captain Kirk.
All right.
The point is that the missions that you accomplish when you're in these places have got to be a thing where we take and make a list of the things. For example, I already know that you know how to make it so you can look at a dog and it doesn't bother you. Now, I realize that maybe that we spent some time together. It was several months ago. It wasn't that long, and maybe it had slipped your mind. But I mean, I want you to. Do you remember what you were supposed to do if you saw a dog? Now, so that it didn't bother you. It's just in your mind. In your mind, just imagine there's a dog sitting there, wagging its tail. A long-haired dog.
All right.
All right. Does it bother you when you think about there being one there?
No, not really. I just see the dog just lying on the carpet, looking, just sitting there.
Now, do you think that an imaginary figure in your mind can put a dog in the real world on the outside?
Yeah, I guess that does seem unlikely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does that sound to you? Is this one of the things you want to mention to the girls when you first meet them? Not likely, huh?
No.
You know what will happen if you tell them something like that?
What?
They'll think you're crazy. And you know what? If you believe it, there's a certain degree that they'll be right. Now, it's time for you to make it so that you start changing it. Here. Dogs. Because it's time for you to go out on the missions where you just go out and walk up to them and look at them. And if a figure pops in your head, you pull out that big pencil. Can you remember that?
Okay.
If not, write it down. This is called an owner's manual to knock off the nonsense. See, there's a lot of stuff going on in your life that you just don't need, and it's taking up your day. Now, when you want to...
And my energy as well.
Well, how the hell would you have the time and the energy, let alone feel cool enough? Because if you're gonna walk up, see, if you do some of this, I tell you what, I'll make a deal with you. Do you have a VCR?
No, I don't, but...
Do you have access to one?
Sure, because, Dave has. an access to one.
Okay. Well, I tell you what. You do this stuff, and I'll send you one of my flirting tapes. I have a tape which explicitly tells you things to do to be able to meet people, in this case, particularly people of the opposite sex, and to have it be fun. See, to me, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
And the things that are a challenge. Now, again, I'm going to be oscillating between asking. There's a question that I ask a lot, which is, what are you going to do when this happens? Because I want to find out how the generalization works. I do this as part of testing generalizations when I install them. And I install a generalization that you can do something about something, and even then I start playing, even with somebody who has a polarity response, I'll say, well, what are you going to do? You're going to go up and talk to girls about this when you first meet them? Because I want to reinforce it again with examples where he is using the generalization. It's not enough just to get it in. You've got to get it to be operational. Now I want to install a thing in him which gets him to start to look at the difficulties in his life as being something that he wants to conquer. In other words, it's something to do. Given that he doesn't have that much to do in life anyway, other than have problems, at least if you turn it around and make it so that it becomes something that's interesting and something to go after. Now, does he move towards or away from? Away from. So what have I got to give him something to move away from? Nonsense, torturing himself, all of these things. He's not going to be moving towards a challenge. He's going to be moving towards a challenge only in relationship to moving away from other things. He's also good at doing identification. It's one of the nice things about being schizophrenic. The little delusional characteristics is that you can assume identities. And I mean, the thing about becoming Captain Kirk, which I think is priceless, is the mission. But again, I mean, listen to the moving away strategy. The mission is to escape the supermarket before time runs out, you know. And of course, we want to now set up the same thing with him, where we set up, you know, since he's telling us that he identifies with television, I want to be able to utilize that to install and get him to use generalizations to begin to go after kicking the shit out of his problems and doing stuff. He's obviously made a lot of headway. To me, you know, he actually made more than I thought he would in some areas. But, you know, if he had somebody that, you know, that could see him more regularly, you know, that would jump on his case, because he is bright enough to understand what's going on, and he needs to be reminded, you know, and to have some adventures. What are you going to do when you see a dog? First off, are you going to go looking for dogs? You going to get this so it don't bother you no more? Does that sound like a challenge for Captain Kirk?
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Bless. Up.
Mm-hmm. And what? Walk up to them, and in your mind, first you have to go, Captain Anbo. You can combine them all. It is your mission today to conquer the nonsense.
Sure. Yeah.
Do you have a audio tape recorder?
No, I don't think so.
You
Well,
don't-
wait a minute. Yeah, I do. I have
What do you mean
combination radio and tape player.
Oh, that'll do.
All would need to get are some cassettes.
Well, that's what I want to do. I'm going to give you a cassette. What we're going to do is we're going to take this session and we're going to put it on audio cassette.
Uh-huh.
And when you get up in the morning, play it.
Mm-hmm.
To remind yourself what your mission is.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Bless.
Picture them being less threatening.
Yeah.
No.
Uh-huh.
Picture them as being no big deal. They're not threatening at all, are they?
And.
You know how to tell when a dog is threatening?
Uh-huh.
What does it do?
Growls.
Right. If it ain't growling, it ain't no problem, right?
Right. threatening
And what happens if any of these internal figures come in and start pestering you? All right. It's more like it. Remember, it's attitude, Andy. That's what we're working on now.
Uh-huh.
Ooh, fear of videotape. We have a new film.
A phobia.
A phobia. Let's get him, Andy.
Okay. All right, bud.
All right, what else? Okay. What about Mary and these internal pictures? What other things make it pop into your mind? Somebody walks up and touches you, right?
Uh-huh.
Or, they walk up and bump into you a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Does Mary pop into your mind, start nagging on you again? Don't we know how to deal with her?
Yeah.
Or any of the rest of them? How do we deal with internal, what do you call those, imaginary figures?
That's true. That's
All right. How do we deal with imaginary figures? Right, imaginary figures, topic head. See, you got to remind yourself, especially if you're going to take these meds, they'll make you forget to do things.
Imaginary.
I'll never forget when I was in the hospital and they introduced me to the wonderful world of
Thorazine?
No, Demerol.
Uh-huh.
I could have just lived there forever. But I decided I wanted to have a life.
Yep. Imaginary figures is,
All right, how do you deal with imaginary figures? Here's the key word there, imaginary.
Mm-hmm.
Underline it.
You bet. Hey, bud.
If you can imagine a figure, you can imagine a big eraser.
Ace. Hearts. That. A.
Erase the parts that you hate. And what do you do though? There's one other piece to it. It's not enough just to erase the things you don't like in life.
Gotta put in something better in its place. Is that it?
Hey, it's, Mary shows up. You know what you got to do? You got to go, we're going to be having some fun now.
Uh-huh.
Because remember what you can do with that eraser. You can erase anything. That includes clothing.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be able to say, we're going to have some fun now. You can put horns on her, a giraffe's head. You can make their ear. You can make them all into, like Spock with big ears.
Mm-hmm.
You can do any damn thing you want to them.
Right.
So as long as you're walking to the bank, you can be amusing yourself. Think about it this way. If you can turn a supermarket into a starship,
Uh-huh.
you can turn them into any damn thing you want.
Right.
Make sense?
Uh-huh.
Good. Write it down.
Uh-huh.
Never thought about it. Going to the supermarket's going to be more fun from now on. I always get something good out of this stuff. See, again, the utilization of taking the generalization and the bits that he's gotten so far and being able to get them to generalize to other things. Because we're already taking the successes that he's had and saying, look, since you've got this, you can and will do this. You can do any damn thing you want. The generalization that he can change things. Now we need to be able to take the success of the supermarket and be able to generalize it to other areas of life, like going to the bank or going to the mall or whatever other activities they are, so that they become adventures. Now, we also want to make a subtle shift, so instead of it being Escape from New York, Death Race 2000, that it becomes something where he's going out and challenging things. So the first thing, of course, I did is started running through TV shows in my mind. That's where we've gone from the Bugs Bunny cure, and now we're going to go to the Mission Impossible cure. All right, now, I want you to stop and try it. What imaginary figures can bother you?
All right, bud.
If you were on the way to the bank, right? Okay, what other kinds of things, right?
Well, the priest is still around, even though, and I have, for a long time have not used the smash the TV screen picture either. So.
What, is it easier to let him bother you?
I don't know if I could say that. I really don't. It's
Well.
pretty hard fighting these figures.
Well, hey, I'm not asking you to fight with him. I'm just
Right.
asking you to knock him out of your head.
Yeah,
It's your brain, but of course you got to put something good in its place.
right.
I mean, what kinds of? Think about it. If you can make a supermarket entertaining, right? Think what you can do with the inside of your mind.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's, for example, you could be planning and plotting out ways of having fun
Mm-hmm.
with all that mental energy.
Right.
You could be thinking of things like, you could think of some, if you have a little bit of me in you from these sessions, you could be thinking of ways to make money.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'll tell you, money makes life more fun. Have you considered getting a job of some kind?
Yeah, I have, but I'm not ready for that right now.
How do you know that? Hit them in the sore spot. They'd never want to go to work, boy. It's the same with the client we worked with. It's that anything they can do to get out of work, boy. Is that your opinion or other people's opinion?
I don't know. It's just something I haven't thought about because I've been so busy with this other stuff.
Well, if you get rid of this other stuff, think about it.
Well,
I mean, how much time do you spend during the day doing all this crap? I mean, what percentage of your day do you spend having a good time, like when you're in the supermarket on a mission? I like that one.
yeah.
I mean, out of your day, how much time do you spend having a good time? Half of it?
I don't know. Maybe it's only a small part.
Well, it should. You're the only one who can tell me. Would you like to make that part of your life bigger?
I sure would.
I mean, you got a hell of a good imagination. You can either use it to enjoy yourself or you can use it to torture yourself. I mean, these are your choices.
Uh-huh.
Now, what kind of situation would you find it most difficult for you to just knock this shit out of your head and start thinking about what could you do to enjoy yourself? You've been using the thing about taking a deep breath to relax? We talked about last time. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Have you tried it?
Well, not. Yeah, I guess I have, but I have trouble with that too. I start breathing like a little like hyperventilation.
It was a deep breath, Andy.
Uh-huh.
That's one deep breath. If you keep taking deep breaths, you'll pass out. We don't, we don't want you to start hyperventilating here. It's just take a deep breath, and then just simply relax. And put yourself in state. Remember when you were sitting here and you were very, very relaxed?
Yes, I remember. I remember the last thing you said was it's time for me to grow up and lighten up.
Lighten up. Do you know what lighten up means?
I sure do.
Okay. Lighten up is see, in your head, when pictures start to bother you, you take the brightness knob and you just make it get lighter and lighter until it goes white. You ever taken the brightness knob on a TV and just turned it all the way?
I think I have.
Yeah. Well, you can imagine what it would be in your mind, right? Okay. Now imagine, let's say you have 3 or 4 figures in your mind and they're all going, you can see them there. You take the brightness knob and you turn it all the way to white. What happens?
Can't see them at all or even hear them because they're all drowned out.
That's a quick way, huh? All right. Now, lightening up takes one more step, right? Then what you do is you put something on the screen that makes you giggle a little bit. That says to yourself, gee, isn't this silly? Where you go, because I stop and I say to yourself, this is kind of silly. to spend this much energy doing this. I'd rather just walk to the bank. And a little dog comes up and it goes, looks at you. Instead of going off on a big thing, you look down and you go, it's a little dog. And then you think about all the times where you let it get to you and you giggle. Think, what a waste of time that was. I don't need that shit.
Yeah, that's right.
Then you start thinking about more interesting things. Like, you know, you're on a mission. I used to live in a place, and across the street from me there was a trailer park. And it was full of senior citizens, and most of them couldn't drive. And they had to ride the municipal bus system, which is a challenge in and of itself in this particular town, because they do a thing where they change the bus routes constantly, just to keep you on your toes.
Yeah.
And all of the people that lived in the trailer park would always stand out in the front, and I used to listen to them talk when I was working in the yard, and they always referred to everything that they were doing as a mission. Like, you know, going to the supermarket was a mission. And to them, what they had done is taken something which was, for most people, a difficulty, and turned it into something that was entertaining. Now, that's what lightening up means when I said, you know, not only will you wake up, but you're going to lighten up. This is the thing that you got to work on for yourself, because this is the challenge. Is every day is to come on, is to look at this stuff and to go, look, whatever it was that was a problem for me, I'm going to tackle it head on. My mission for the day is dogs. My mission for the day is just, for example, one of the things is like when you walk in the mall and you see people, and it makes you feel good. There's all these good-looking women, which I think is nice how they just display them all over malls, just for your benefit.
Right.
Is to realize is to start constructing in your mind ways where you could do things like, you don't have to go up and get, say, will you spend the next 50 years with me?
That was a joke anyway, so.
Well, I don't know. I did it once. It was no joke. In this particular situation, you can try starting with something a little bit smaller, like hello.
Right. Or hi, yeah, that type of thing, or smiling at him.
Yeah. Now, wouldn't that be a lot more fun than creating all these imaginary figures in your head that nag you?
Yes.
It strikes me as it'd be a lot more practical, too. Now, what I want you to write on that thing is the word practical. Because I want you to start asking yourself the question. For example, is it practical for you to spend, like, from the time you leave your house to the time you get to the bank, how many times, do you have one of these little episodes with your imaginary figures? Would you say on the average?
I haven't really counted, maybe about 10 times or so.
How far is the bank from your house?
Yeah.
Is it 10 blocks?
Well, I do walk there. I really don't know how long.
Well,
let's see.
How far? 10 blocks?
Maybe 10 blocks or so, or say I go east on an avenue.
Okay, well, let's say it's 10 blocks.
Okay.
Right. Then the challenge for you is to be able to go to the bank, and the first morning, see if you can cut it down to 8 episodes. Then the next day 7, the next day 6, then the next day 5, and then 4, and then 3, and then 2, until you get it down to just 1. And each time one of them is gone, put in an episode that's pleasant. So like as you go from one block to the next block, each time you cross the block, just like when you walk in the supermarket and you go, okay, here's the adventure. Okay, I'm now on a mission. Okay, one block, do Mission Impossible. The next block, do something else. You ever see that with Mr. Phelps?
Oh, yeah, I remember Mission Impossible.
Good. Well, you put a tape recorder in your mind, like that, and it goes, Mr. Andy, we have the mission, should you choose to accept it in the next block, is to be able to walk through, and every dog you see, look at it and go, it's just a dog.
Yeah.
See, one of the things is that you have to be able to do with people that are like this, you have to do things which are real rote. And installation with him, in case you haven't noticed, I'm doing lots and lots of repetition over and over and over again, Because, I mean, you just got to pound this shit in. They've had so many years of engaging in the kind of nonsensical behavior that's installed in them, and I'm sure that there's plenty of reasons why it's there and all kinds of stuff. It's just, for me, it's a step at a time. That if he can start by, you know, just trying to decrease, because, see, most of the time they don't think about it in terms of how many episodes between the bank. But as you bring it up, if he writes it on his list, he's going to begin to think of the distance between the bank and his house in terms of numbers of episodes, so that he knows that the plan is to decrease the number. See, mostly what's happened is he's been dealt with by people dealing with him by activity, the people that have sorted with him. It's about when you're crazy. It isn't about any measurement of how much time he spends being nuts or how many times he's doing nutty things. It's about, so what it doesn't allow him is to have a range to be successful, because he could do real well for 3 weeks, and if he has one bad episode, then the whole thing is started again. So it sets up a failure syndrome when you work with people that way. They build the generalization that know how that the only thing they can do is hold out for a while, but that it's always going to come back. Whereas if you change the orientation so that the orientation is now where the generalization is you're getting better, and the way to measure it, which is what I'm getting to now, is about getting better. I'm leading up into, I'm going to install now a generalization that has to do with the fact that he is getting better. But before I install the generalization, I'm putting in a metered way of measuring his success. So he can measure it by the number of episodes, the number of times, and also the number of ways in which he has to deal with it. And instead I'm going to have him do this every day, where he gets up and pays attention to the activity of conquering his problems. Now, that sort of thing, so that you begin to turn the things you do in your life into something that's simpler. So that you can take a deep breath and lighten up. Start enjoying what you're doing. Start thinking about things that are more practical. Like, instead of, you know, getting married for 50 years, starting with hello and working your way up.
Yeah. That 50 years of your time was just a joke.
I know it was, but I'm gonna throw it in your face anyway, Andy. It's the kind of guy I am.
All right.
I'm a hard taskmaster, haven't you noticed? That's why they bring me in, because I beat people into being sensible. You know, and this isn't just you. I do this to everybody. Say, I mean, there are lots of people. I just had a client that I saw down in Houston, and this guy made you look like you were casual. I mean, this guy, every time he did anything, he had to spend like 2 hours in his mind where he would go over. So if he had 5 minutes worth of life, he spent 2 hours going back over it again. And I mean, again, and each time he'd go over it, it would get louder and the images would get bigger in his mind. Pain in the ass to do that. Plus he had a voice that was screaming at him in front of his head. Constantly. And, you know, I told him, I said, why don't you just stop it? And he said that he couldn't.
That's how I've been feeling.
Well, the thing is they're still your voices. Like, for example, where's one of the voices located that bothers you? I'll show you what I did with him. All right, so do you have, what's one of the voices that aggravates you?
Like, there's two phrases of it. One is, I'm proud of you, you took it like a man. That's one. And another is, what are you going to do about it? You know, if there's something wrong with
Okay, where does the voice come from?
In here.
Well,
What do you mean, where in my head?
Where does it sound like it's coming to you? What direction? Does it sound like it's coming from the side, from the top down, from the front forward?
Let's see. I think maybe in front of me.
So it's coming from the front forward?
Yes.
Towards you? Okay. Now, just close your eyes for a minute. In a minute. Excuse me.
Okay.
Now, what I want you to do in your mind is to simply, I want you to float up and look down at yourself and literally see a speaker where the voice comes from in your mind.
So I'm up in the air looking down on myself and the speaker in front of me?
Yeah, speaker, where this comes out of. All right. Then what I want you to do is you know what happens if you disconnect the speaker wires?
You don't hear any sound coming from it.
All right. try it in your mind.
Okay.
Start out with the speaker there and hear the voice doing it. Just the way it normally does.
Uh-huh.
And then just unplug it. And then float back down. Is it quiet now? Now, put that
Good
on
old
your
direct
list.
commands.
Voices bother you? Disconnect them. This is under the major category of knock it the fuck off.
It's a technical term.
If you don't practice this stuff next time, we're going to tattoo it on you.
All right.
Now, I want you also to notice that I'm able to describe and have him do these things without using NLP jargon. It's gotten to the point in the NLP community where I can't even understand people talk. And I would like to reiterate to you that jargon is important. It's a shorthand that sometimes we use to talk to each other. But you don't have to educate your client in the jargon. You can do it in very, very simple metaphors. I mean, you know, you don't have to talk about auditory internal, you know, and you don't have to, you know, talk about outcomes and all this stuff. You can just talk about knock it the fuck off. He knows what that means. And by having him, you know, if he's got voices in his head, and you have him float up and see speakers where the voices are and disconnect the wires, right? That's something he can understand what's going on. It's a metaphor for using your brain. And it's a very, very, it's one of the things that works pretty simply, is that you take one representational system and you use overlap. You guys remember overlap? You overlap into the other system and give them control, so that they use one system to control another. And especially when people have wanton and rampant internal processes, it's one of the things that will help you to get control, because they can't get control directly in the system that it's in as easily. Andy Fast Pen. Come on, Andy. But still, it's important to wait till he gets it written down, even though he's taking forever, because you want it to be self-generated. Remember, I picked up that pad and held it on my lap, like I was going to do this. And then when I handed it over to him, it's because I want him to identify with being in control. That's part of how I want to reinforce this generalization. All right. You hear that?
Here.
Okay. I can't help but notice you left one of them out. Here, put in number 3. You left one of the things we talked about off.
Okay, number 3.
Okay, we'll just put this under there for now. Plan fun. Block by block.
Oops.
Oops. Oops, we left that one off.
Plan, fun.
Plan fun. Block by block.
Okay.
Now, the other one that got left off of there is 4, is that when you get up in the morning, I want you to look yourself in the mirror, and I want you to make sure you tell yourself you're not going to go through this crap all day long like you have been.
Uh-huh.
That you've had it, and you're going to put an end to it.
Yeah.
It's your brain, and you're going to run it. Write it down. Because all the things that we've done here, all the techniques, the things about the smashing the TVs, or as you so aptly put it, you could just turn them off. All the things that we talked about, I want you to keep doing.
until you have control of your brain. You can make it do what you want to. So if somebody comes up and goes, touches you, you turn around and go, excuse me, instead of having a raging flurry of things go on inside your head. That's too much work. Don't you agree?
Yeah. Our life. Okay, there. I put on taking control of my life. Is that good?
Yeah, wow, it's taking control of your life.
Yeah.
Oh, put another one on here. Think about getting job. It's a good first step. See, if you spend all that time that you spent thinking about all this other stuff, thinking about, a way to get a job, who knows? You might come up with some real creative alternatives. We might all end up working for you in a couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah, think about that. After all, you have plenty of time to do it with. If you knock off this other shit, you're going to have time to do whatever you want to do. Now, I'll tell you what, set this down for a minute, okay? Because there's just a little quick thing I want to do with you. Okay. Relax, Andy.
Okay.
Now, I want you to do something. I want you to reach over and touch your shoulder right here, okay? All right, just touch it. I don't want you to squeeze it or anything. Just put your hand there like that. Okay, now, put it down to your side, okay? Now, I want you to just take it up, put it like this.
Uh-huh.
Take a deep breath. And I want you, when you touch yourself on your shoulder there, because the minute I want you to do this, I'll tell you when, okay?
Okay.
Just set your hand down there. I'll tell you when to go into trance, all right? Look at me. I just want you to do this, like that. Just touch yourself. As a way of reminding yourself, say, you remember the Vulcan thing like this?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Or was the Klingon one? I always liked that one. All right. This is a little like that, only it's gentle. The thing
Or maybe like the Vulcan neck pinch. Maybe that.
No, I don't want you to do the Vulcan neck pinch. That's it, because I want you to use this in the outside world. You'll be walking down the street, next thing you know, you'll be on the pavement. This is just a way of gently. Let your arm relax, okay? Just let go loose here. You got to learn to loosen up a little bit, Andy. Lighten up and loosen up here.
Right.
Got to think casual. Okay, because whenever things start to bother you, what I want you to do is take a deep breath and go, I'm not going to take this shit no more. And then when you bring your hand back across, I want you to bring it right across your face like this and wipe whatever pictures are bothering you out of your mind. Okay? Now I want you to start. Pick one of the pictures that bother you. Mm-hmm. Okay, can you pick it?
Yeah.
Put it right in your head. Bigger, brighter. So it starts to aggravate you. Then take your hand, just touch yourself on the shoulder, take a deep breath, and bring your hand up across your eyes, just like that, and wipe the picture out. Mm-hmm. Is it gone?
Yes.
All right. Then you just let your hand go down, and I want you immediately to think of something pleasant. For example, out of the last session that we had,